Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we deliver the essential, fascinating insights buried in the research stacks you absolutely need to read. Today, we are undertaking a really critical mission, deep diving into the emotional lives of teenagers. And maybe more importantly, fundamentally redefining what emotional health actually looks like for them. I want to start with a story, actually. It kind of illustrates the common trap we all fall into, I think. A friend of mine was absolutely beside herself with worry about her son, Will.
Okay.
He was a high school junior, just about to start senior year, and his parents announced they were moving across the country to Seattle.
Oh, wow. Right before senior year. That's tough.
Exactly. And Will was, well, her words were a mess, cranky, tearful, just devastated about leaving his friends, his girlfriend, his school, everything.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
And my friend's immediate conclusion, the one we're all sort of trained to jump to, was he's sinking. This is serious clinical depression.
Mhm. And that is the classic parental fear, isn't it? We see that intense emotional pain, maybe overwhelming sadness, maybe explosive anger, and our immediate kind of modern response is, okay, this is a pathology, this needs fixing, medically fixed or, contained with therapy.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if we apply a more functional psychological lens to Will's situation, what's truly fascinating, actually, is that the intense upset he felt, that's actually evidence of his good mental health.
Wait, hang on. That sounds completely counterintuitive. How can being a quote-unquote mess, being debilitatingly upset, signal health?
Because he was having an entirely appropriate response to a really significant loss. Think about it. He was thriving, right? He spent years building deep connections. He was about to hit senior year, top of the social ladder kind of thing. Losing all of that should feel terrible. That feeling of loss, the crankiness, the devastation, that's actually the measure of how much he values his relationships and his life. If he had just shrugged, packed his bags and said, whatever, I'll make new friends, that would be the concerning sign. His sadness, his anger, it signals his emotional system is working properly, vigorously even.
So the intensity of his reaction actually confirms the strength of his connections, which is like a key marker of adolescent success. It means these powerful emotions, they're a feature, not some kind of bug to be fixed. Wow, that's a massive shift in perspective.
It really is. So that's our mission for this deep dive today. We're recalibrating our view. We need to ditch this modern, frankly, dangerous idea that teenagers are only mentally healthy when they feel, good.
Right. No bad days allowed.
Exactly. No. Instead, we're adopting a functional, psychologically accurate definition. Emotional health means having the right feelings at the right time and being able to manage those feelings effectively. We have to stop pathologizing normal human distress.
Okay, let's unpack that first huge cultural myth then. The idea that emotion is somehow the enemy of reason. We're taught, aren't we, that when things get heated, our logic just flies out the window, that the ideal decision maker is like cool and objective, a machine.
Spock, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But our source material here suggests something much more, well, integrated, human.
Absolutely. Emotions are fundamentally informational. They're data. We really should treat them like messengers, bringing status reports on our internal world, our external world, not as like static or disruptions to be ignored.
Like warning lights on a dashboard.
Precisely. If you feel dread every single Sunday night, that's data, right? It's telling you something is off about your work situation. If you feel this wave of relief after finally saying no to something you were dreading, that's data guiding your future choices about boundaries.
Okay, that makes sense. And what's really compelling, I thought, was the evidence showing emotional investment can actually improve sound deduction. That just flies in the face of the whole stay detached idea. Tell us about that British War veterans study. That was fascinating.
Oh, it was a brilliant piece of research. So these veterans were given logic problems, right? 3 kinds.
Yeah.
One set was combat related. Another set was emotionally loaded, but not combat-like family stuff. And the third was just neutral, abstract logic puzzles.
Okay. So if the emotion is the enemy theory holds, they should ace the neutral ones, right?
That's what you'd think. But they didn't. They reasoned most soundly, most logically, on the combat-related problems.
No, seriously.
Yeah. Their personal emotional investment in that topic, the high stakes, the lived experience, it actually seemed to bolster their ability to make accurate deductions. It wasn't just dry facts. It was this synthesis of feeling and fact. Emotion sharpened their focus, their judgment, right when it mattered most to them.
Wow. Okay, so emotional connection can be like a cognitive turbo boost in areas we care about. But there's a limit, right? You can have too much emotion, because the study had a really important caveat.
Yes, absolutely crucial. The same study included veterans who were suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Now, these individuals, they were burdened by just overwhelming, intrusive emotional pain, and they underperformed on all the logic problems, even the neutral ones.
Why was that?
The sheer intensity of their suffering created what the researchers called a cognitive drag. It just overwhelmed everything else. So the takeaway is balance, you know. Emotion should be a valuable contributor, a voice on your internal decision-making board, but it can't be allowed to just shout down all the other thoughtful considerations.
That makes sense. We see that balance, or maybe the search for that balance, in the story about Tom, the student applying to college. High achiever, but anxious.
Right. He had the grades, the scores.
Yeah.
He could have aimed for anywhere, Ivy League, across the country. But he only applied to schools within like a 3-hour drive of home.
And his counselor was worried, thinking the anxiety was limiting him unnecessarily.
Yeah, but Tom's anxiety, in this case, wasn't a failure. It was actually delivering some wise data.
Yeah.
Tom knew himself. He knew leaving home was hard for him. He felt that transition tension. So his anxiety was kind of whispering, hey, maybe find a safety net.
So he listened.
He listened, applied to great local schools, places he could easily get home from for a weekend if he felt overwhelmed, without it being a massive production. His feeling, his anxiety helped him find a sustainable solution for him. He listened to his gut as data, and guess what? He ended up thriving. #B. The cultural fear of unhappiness.
Okay, so if emotion is such valuable data, why did we as a culture start rejecting the uncomfortable stuff, especially in teenagers? The sources talk about this dramatic shift over the last few decades. We somehow became afraid of being unhappy. It's led to this weird pressure on kids to feel good all the time. What happened?
Yeah, it's a really significant shift. We can trace this fear back to, well, 3 major trends that kind of intersected over the last 40 years or so. They converged to make psychological unease seem unacceptable, almost like a personal failing.
Yeah, that's the first one.
The first was the huge proliferation of really effective psychiatric medications. Think Prozac, hitting the scene in the late 80s.
Now, we have to be clear, these drugs are absolute lifesavers for people with severe mental illness.
Absolutely critical, no question. But their widespread availability really changed the cultural default setting, you could say.
Yeah.
The numbers are just staggering.
Yeah.
In 1987, only about 37% of people getting treated for depression were on an antidepressant.
Okay.
By 2015, that number jumped to 81%. And here's the kicker. During that same period, the percentage of people getting psychotherapy, talk therapy for depression, dropped by 20%.
Wow. So pills up, therapy down.
Exactly. And that fostered this widespread cultural belief, maybe subconscious, that if a pill can contain or deter emotional pain, then maybe that pain isn't necessary. Maybe it's not required for growth. It kind of fueled the idea that being human shouldn't have to involve feeling bad.
Which leads right into the second trend, doesn't it? The absolute explosion of the wellness industry. It's not just about basic self-care anymore. It's this massive commercial enterprise promising, well, maybe promising too much.
Oh, it's a juggernaut. It's expanded beyond anyone's wildest dream. Get this comparison.
Yeah.
The global mental wellness industry. It's worth about $131 billion a year now. That significantly outmatches the global entertainment industry, which is around $100 billion.
No way. We spend more on wellness than movies and music.
Combined, yeah.
Okay.
We're spending more trying to buy inner peace than we are on being entertained.
Right.
And the industry sells everything, right? Mindfulness apps, essential oils, fancy self-care retreats, all promising short-term comfort.
But the danger isn't the products themselves necessarily. It's the marketing message.
That's the heart of it. The danger is the relentless commercial messaging that implies these things can actually ward off unwanted emotions entirely. Like, you can achieve this perpetual state of unruffled zen if you just buy the right stuff or do the right practice.
Which is impossible.
Common sense tells us it's impossible.
Yeah.
They set this expectation that you should be able to buy or practice your way out of normal human struggles.
Okay, so trend 1. Medication makes pain seem optional. Trend 2. Wellness industry promises happiness is achievable, maybe even purchasable. What does that lead to?
Trend 3. What we call failing at wellness. If you bought into the idea that discomfort is preventable, what happens when stress inevitably hits? Which it always does, especially for teenagers.
They feel like they've done something wrong.
Exactly. Teenagers now feel bad about feeling bad. When exams hit and they feel that normal, expected tension and nerves, the very state that actually motivates them to study, they feel worse than previous generations might have. Why? Because they've absorbed the message that this discomfort was somehow avoidable. that they failed at being well.
So psychological health gets mistakenly boiled down to just feeling good. And any struggle, even normal adversity, feels like proof that something is really wrong with me.
Yes. Adversity used to be framed as, character building. Now it feels like a personal failure.
And this whole cultural pressure cooker is happening while, in reality, adolescent well-being has been declining. Even before the pandemic, the numbers were worrying.
They were alarming, frankly.
Yeah.
From 2009 to 2019, that decade before COVID, the percentage of high schoolers reporting persistent sadness or hopelessness, it jumped from 26% to 37%. Anxiety also shot up from 34% to 44%. This was already a crisis.
And then COVID hit, which just derailed everything for teenagers, didn't it? Especially those core tasks of becoming independent and connecting deeply with peers.
Completely. Global studies found depression and anxiety symptoms basically doubled among teens during COVID. But the gender disparity in how it played out and how help was sought is devastating. In early 2021, ER visits for suspected suicide attempts went up 51% among teenage girls.
51%.
Compared to just 4% among teenage boys.
Why such a huge difference?
Well, experts suspect that girls, who often rely more heavily on social connection and talking through feelings, co-regulation, may have felt the isolation of the pandemic much more acutely. Boys might have turned more to, say, gaming or other solitary distractions.
So you layer all this together, the cultural pressure to feel good, the real rise in distress, the pandemic, social isolation, political turmoil, inequality. It's no wonder parents are worried sick.
Exactly. The context is incredibly challenging right now.
Okay, so to really get a handle on why teenagers can be so volatile, we absolutely have to talk biology. The psych literature usually divides youth into 3 rough stages, right?
Yeah, broadly speaking, you've got early childhood, birth to maybe 5, intense emotions, not much regulation yet.
Right, toddler meltdowns.
Exactly. Then comes latency, say, ages 6 to 10. This is often called the emotional hibernation stage. Kids are generally pretty easygoing, manageable.
The calm before the storm.
Pretty much. Because then adolescence kicks in. And it starts earlier than most people think, often around age 10 or 11, when puberty begins. And that's when the emotional volume knob gets cranked way back up.
And it's not just hormones, is it? It's the brain itself undergoing this massive change.
Massive is the right word. It's like a full-scale renovation project happening inside their skulls.
Yeah.
Neurologically, it's almost violent. Teens are forming new neurons, brain cells, at a rate 4 to 5 times faster than adults.
Wow.
But at the same time, their brains are doing this aggressive pruning, basically getting rid of neural connections they aren't using much, making things more efficient.
Okay, so building new stuff and tearing down old stuff simultaneously. And then there's myelination. Explain that one again, because that seems key to the power increase.
Right. Myelination is crucial. Think of it like insulation. It's this fatty sheath that wraps around the axons, the long wires of the neurons. It's like ripping out old, slow, dial-up internet cables and replacing them with super-fast fiber optics. This process makes the signals travel much faster, more powerfully, and way more efficiently. The adolescent brain becomes a genuine powerhouse compared to a child's brain.
So it's faster, more powerful, more efficient. Sounds great, but there's a catch, isn't there? This gawky brain idea.
That's the absolute key to understanding the volatility. The renovation doesn't happen evenly across the whole brain. The limbic system, deep inside, houses the amygdala, the ancient structure that generates emotions like fear, anger, excitement. That part gets its upgrade first.
So the emotional accelerator gets supercharged early on.
Exactly. Turbocharged. Meanwhile, the prefrontal region, the part right behind your forehead, responsible for planning, perspective, impulse control, thinking through consequences, that part lags way behind.
Yeah.
It doesn't fully mature until the early or even mid-20s.
Oh, so you've got this high-performance emotional engine bolted onto, well, a pretty underdeveloped set of brakes.
Precisely. All gas, weak brakes. The newly beefed up emotion centers just completely overwhelm the parts of the brain that are supposed to provide perspective and control. This explains so much, like that famous anecdote about Nat, the high schooler whose mom mentioned putting away the Christmas decorations.
Well, yeah, she just completely lost it, right? Started weeping uncontrollably.
Totally. Crying that she didn't want Christmas to be over. And then, after this huge meltdown, she apparently looked at her mom and said, "I feel like a crazy person."
Because rationally, she knew it wasn't a big deal.
Exactly. Her logical brain knew storing decorations wasn't a tragedy, but her immediate, intense limbic response, that feeling of joy and comfort being snatched away, was so overwhelmingly powerful, it just physically short-circuited her rational self.
That lopsided development really does turn them into emotional well, wrecks sometimes.
It does. The good news for parents who are, enduring this phase is that while the brain keeps remodeling until the mid-20s, the most intense period of that emotional volatility often peaks around 13 or 14. Then it usually starts to slowly taper off. Usually, tag away B, the separation individuation phase.
Okay, so besides the internal brain rewiring, there's this huge psychological job teens have to do, right? Separation individuation, which I think your term for it is much more relatable. The several months when your teenager can't stand how you chew.
Yeah, that pretty much captures it. It's this fundamental psychological drive to figure out who they are, separate from their parents,
Yeah.
to establish their own distinct personal brand, you could say.
And because their identity is still kind of tangled up with their parents, especially early on, they feel this urgent need to differentiate.
Right. So if they see something about their parents' brand that doesn't align with the cool, independent identity they're trying to build, maybe mom wears an outfit they deem dumpy in front of their friends, or dad tells a joke they find incredibly corny, it can feel like a genuine threat to their fragile, emerging sense of self.
Okay, that explains the embarrassment. But what makes it such a guaranteed no-win for parents is the paradox, right? They get annoyed if you don't match their brand, but they get really annoyed if you do match it somehow.
Oh, totally. That's the individuation side, kicking it hard. Think about that example of the mom who loved baking, and her high school daughter was just getting into it.
Yeah.
So the mom, trying to be helpful, offers advice. Here's the science of baking soda, or this is how you temper chocolate. Genuinely useful tips. But the daughter just got furious. Oh my God, Mom, stop it. You're ruining my thing.
Because baking was supposed to be her independent competence.
Exactly. If mom is already an expert and jumps in with advice, it completely undermines the teen's effort to own that identity. It's not hers anymore.
Ugh, it sounds absolutely exhausting for parents. So what's the survival strategy when you're facing this relentless, often baffling friction?
Well, the main strategy is really choosing your battles. Trying to engage as little as possible when they're just being generally unpleasant or moody. Now, you can't let them be rude or aggressive, obviously.
Right. Boundaries matter.
Absolutely. But getting drawn into arguments when they're in that state, it usually just escalates the whole emotional storm. You end up with slammed doors and them hiding in their room.
So what's the alternative?
Offer them 3 clear, civil options for how they can interact with you in that moment.
Okay, lay them out for us.
Option 1, you can be friendly and tell me what's actually wrong. Option 2, you can tell me what's wrong while being civil, even if you're clearly upset. Option 3, you can just let me know you need some space right now and we can talk later when you're ready.
And anything outside of those is off the table.
Off the table. It sets a firm boundary, respect is required, but it also acknowledges their feelings and their very real need for space sometimes. It stops that cycle of parental nagging or arguing that just fuels the fire. Hashtag, Sigano, risk-seeking, and hot cognition. Okay, let's shift gears slightly and talk about risk-taking. We mentioned that rise in dopamine, right? The brain chemical that makes new, exciting experiences feel incredibly alluring to teenagers.
Yeah, the novelty-seeking chemical.
Right. So you combine that heightened drive for novelty and reward with that still developing capacity for impulse control, those weak brakes we talked about. And neurologically, you get a system that's essentially all gas and no brakes.
Biologically primed to seek thrills, but their ability to slam on the brakes when logic says danger ahead is still lagging.
Precisely. And this is where understanding the difference between cold and hot cognition is absolutely vital for parents.
Okay, explain those. Cold cognition first.
Cold cognition is their sound, rational thinking. It happens when they're in a calm, low-stakes environment. Like they're standing in your kitchen on a Saturday afternoon, totally relaxed. You ask them about the dangers of texting while driving. They can perfectly outline all the risks, the potential consequences. They get it.
They know the rules. Intellectually.
Intellectually, yes. But then comes hot cognition. That's their thinking process in the heat of the moment.
When things are exciting, social.
Exactly. Maybe they're at a party, surrounded by friends, loud music. There's an exciting vibe. In that hot cognition setting, all that careful kitchen table reasoning can just evaporate. The pull of social rewards, feeling accepted, looking cool, and the visceral thrill of the moment just take over.
They aren't weighing the long-term risks anymore.
Not really. They're focused on the immediate, powerful reward, like that anecdote about sketching we looked at, where kids were holding onto a rope tied to a car, being pulled through snowy streets.
Yeah, sounds terrifying.
They knew it was dangerous, intellectually. In cold cognition, they'd admit it. But out there, having fun with friends, the thrill the social aspect. It just completely overrode the logical danger assessment. That was hot cognition in action.
And this isn't just bad choices, it's neurological. It's why things like graduated driver licensing laws exist, restricting teen passengers.
Absolutely. The data is clear. The risk of an accident skyrockets with every additional teenager in the car. It's the power of group hot cognition.
So this gets us a really practical strategy, doesn't it? We need to use those cold cognition moments to plan for the inevitable hot cognition settings.
That's the key. You have to capitalize on those quiet, rational times. Your teen mentions an upcoming party, a concert. Use that calm moment to talk through potentially tricky situations. What if someone offers you a ride home and they've been drinking? What's your plan?
And the framing is crucial, right? Focus on safety, not judgment.
Yes. Center the discussion squarely on safety, not on getting caught or breaking rules. The most effective approach sounds something like, look, I don't want you worrying about getting in trouble with me. My only concern is that you might get hurt. If you are ever in a situation that feels unsafe, you call me. Anytime, anywhere, no questions asked, except, are you okay? The only conversation we will have then is about getting you safe.
So you create this preset safety script during cold cognition.
Exactly. A behavioral plan they can hopefully access even when the hot cognition kicks in and the brakes are feeling weak.
Okay, so when we talk about how teens express all these intense emotions, we can't just stick to biology. We absolutely have to bring in socialization. Our sources are really clear on this. Those psychological differences we see between genders and how they handle emotion, they're overwhelmingly learned, socialized, and it starts basically from birth.
It really does. Parents often unconsciously start with these built-in images. Daughters are expected to be sensitive, nurturing. Sons are expected to be tough, resilient. And that expectation shapes how they respond right from the start.
We actively teach them which feelings are okay to show.
We do. We tend to accept sadness and fear more readily in girls. We're culturally more comfortable seeing that. But with boys, we're often more accepting of anger, maybe even aggression. We subtly, or not so subtly, discourage expressions that don't fit those stereotypes.
And we even give them different instructions for how to cope, right?
Totally different playbooks.
Yeah.
When girls are sad or scared, the parental tendency is often to encourage them to talk about it. What's wrong? Tell me about your feelings. Share. Connect.
But for boys
are much more often urged to cope through distraction. Just don't think about it. Man up. Go shoot some hoops. You'll feel better. Focus on something else. Push it down. We saw that really clearly in that example of Zach.
The boy who felt anxious after a girl asked about the relationship.
Yeah. He felt deeply uncomfortable, anxious, and his immediate, culturally learned reaction turned to World of Warcraft. Immerse himself in the game to just dampen that uncomfortable feeling, distract himself. His female counterpart, Mara, in the exact same situation. She was probably texting her friends, trying to talk through the whole confusing interaction, reinforcing that pattern of sharing and processing.
And this different cultural coding creates these two really distinct pathways for handling distress, which clinically can lead to problems, splitting kids into these sort of internalizing and externalizing groups.
That's the clinical language, yes. Girls are statistically more likely to collapse inward when distressed. We see more anxiety, numbness, depression. Those are the internalizing disorders. Because sadness is culturally allowed for girls, it can become the default channel for all kinds of distress, even anger, which might get turned back inward as self-criticism. Boys are far more likely to lash out. Aggression, breaking rules, oppositional defiant disorder, the externalizing disorders. If a boy feels deep sadness or insecurity, but he hasn't been given the tools or the cultural permission to express it directly, he might discharge that internal pain by acting out against the world. Clinicians see this all the time. A boy feels disappointed after a family visit, may be sad, and it comes out immediately as antagonism towards staff or other kids. ###############################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################
script is just immense, isn't it? The source material mentions how boys themselves really energetically enforce this code. Basically, one big rule: don't show weakness.
Oh, it's ruthlessly policed among peers. Any display of vulnerability, emotional pain, even physical pain sometimes can be met with insults, slurs, accusations of acting like a girl. It's incredibly restrictive.
Which leaves them totally at a loss when they do feel genuinely hurt or insecure or overwhelmed. They have these complex feelings bubbling up, but no acceptable way to talk about them, no safe space.
Exactly. They lack the vocabulary and the permission. Yet, despite all this pressure to toughen up, the research also shows something really important. Boys deeply long for intimacy and connection.
That came out during the pandemic studies, didn't it? With the anonymous chats.
Yes, it was fascinating. When they were given the safety of anonymity in online chats, they revealed this intense craving for emotional connection. They asked incredibly personal, vulnerable questions, things they would likely never dare ask face-to-face with their peers.
So the need is there, it's just suppressed.
Deeply suppressed, which suggests that for many boys, really close friendships, or maybe a romantic relationship, often become the only culturally sanctioned places where they feel safe enough to find that emotional connection and intimacy they actually need.
Okay, so boys are pushed towards stoicism or acting out. What about girls? Sharing feelings is encouraged, but that can backfire too, right? If it turns into co-rumination.
Ah, yes, co-rumination. That's a really corrosive pattern. It's defined as thinking, talking, dwelling constantly, repetitively, and fruitlessly on something painful.
Like picking at a scab.
That's a perfect analogy. It prevents healing.
Yeah.
A healthy, supportive conversation might sound like, oh, wow, tell me what happened. That sounds awful. I'm so sorry. Okay, now let's go get ice cream, watch a movie, do something fun.
Okay. Acknowledge, validate, then shift focus.
Right. But a co-ruminative conversation sounds like, okay, tell me the whole story again. Wait, what exactly did he say then? Let's analyze every single word. And oh my God, what if this happens next? And what if that awful thing happens? It just keeps them marinating in the negative emotion, amplifying it.
So adults really need to step in sometimes and teach that boundary. Friends don't let friends co-ruminate.
Absolutely. Gently guide them towards problem solving or healthy distraction once the initial venting is done. And, this whole pressure cooker of gendered expectations, it also fuels some really negative interactions between genders. Specifically, harassment.
How does that connect?
Well, think about middle school. Girls typically hit puberty and have cognitive growth spurts about 2 years ahead of boys, on average.
Right. They seem much more mature often.
Which can leave middle school boys feeling developmentally outmatched, maybe even inadequate or insecure, especially if they've bought into that rigid traditional idea of masculinity, where being shown up by a girl feels humiliating.
And that insecurity then leads some boys to lash out.
Sadly, yes. A subset of boys will try to manage that insecurity by, well, abusing the cultural power they often hold. They try to take girls down a few pegs, often through sexual harassment, making crude jokes, suggestive comments, unwanted touching, vulgar gestures. It's important to understand this is usually about asserting power and shaky masculinity, not about clumsy flirting.
And it has a devastating impact on girls' self-esteem just as they're navigating adolescence. They suddenly feel objectified, unsafe.
Exactly. It contributes directly to that well-documented drop in self-esteem we often see in adolescent girls. ######C. The context of racial disparities.
Now, it is absolutely crucial that we acknowledge how these gendered rules for emotion are profoundly shaped and often made much worse by race and racism. We have to talk about adultification, particularly for Black children and adolescents. This needs careful attention.
Yes, adultification is a severe and systemic form of racial bias. It's well documented. It means that Black children are consistently perceived by many adults, including educators and authorities, as being older than they actually are.
Older, and therefore
Less innocent, less in need of protection, more responsible for their actions, and fundamentally more deserving of blame or punishment when they make mistakes or act out, compared to white peers doing the same thing.
And this racist lens applies differently but harmfully to both Black girls and Black boys. For Black girls, it often involves hypersexualization.
That's right. Research consistently shows Black girls are often viewed as being more sexually knowledgeable or mature than white girls of the same age. This has terrible consequences. For instance, if they experience distress, maybe they're victims of sexual harassment at school, adults might be more likely to ignore it, minimize it, or even subtly blame the girl, viewing her as somehow more complicit because she's perceived as older or more fast.
Leaving them feeling completely unprotected and betrayed.
Profoundly unsafe,
Okay.
yes. And for Black boys, the bias often manifests as viewing them through what the sources call hostility-colored glasses,
Meaning they're seen as more aggressive.
even when the behavior is identical. There was a study that's quite powerful where mostly white college students watched videos of Black and white elementary school boys engaging in ambiguous behavior, maybe roughhousing, maybe accidentally stepping on homework. The students consistently rated the Black boys as more hostile, more threatening, more inherently aggressive than the white boys doing the exact same things.
And this bias gets worse as the kids get older.
Yes, the perception of hostility increases with the perceived age, which, because of adultification, means Black boys are seen as hostile younger and more often.
Which has just devastating real-world consequences for how any display of anger or even just assertion is met by authorities.
The punitive response can be incredibly severe. Look at school suspensions. Black girls are 6 times more likely to be suspended than white girls, even though research shows they don't actually defy rules at higher rates.
6 times.
6 times. So when a black girl asserts herself or expresses justifiable anger and emotion we've established as necessary data, it's often met with this massive, disproportionate institutional punishment. And this is the absolutely crucial point for everyone listening. Before we ever question whether a black child's anger is being appropriately expressed, we must first question whether they are being held to a significantly stricter, racially biased standard than their white peers.
We have to acknowledge the constant emotional toll of navigating systemic racism itself.
It weighs incredibly heavily. That context is paramount.
Okay, so we've established emotions are valuable data. Experiencing discomfort is actually necessary for growth. The final, really critical piece is learning how to manage those emotions effectively. And the first tool in that toolkit seems simple, but maybe isn't. Expression. Just talking about it.
Just talking. Sounds basic, but talk therapy works for a reason. And the power of simply verbalizing feelings is measurable, right down to the physiological level. There was this great study where people looked at upsetting images. One group was told to just talk about their personal emotional responses. I feel scared, this makes me angry. The other group just stated objective facts about the pictures. There are 3 people. The car is red.
And they measured their physical response.
Yeah, with electrodes measuring emotional arousal, and the results were clear. Talking about the feelings actually had a measurable calming effect. It reduced the intensity of the physiological arousal.
Why does that happen?
Putting feelings into words seems to shift the activity from the purely emotional reactive parts of the brain, like the amygdala, towards the more cognitive, language-based parts, like the prefrontal cortex. That act of naming it gives you distance and dials down the intensity.
Okay, so talking helps, but the listening part. That's the challenge for parents, isn't it? We hate seeing our kids suffer, so our reflex is just fix it. Okay, here's what you should do. Talk to your manager, or forget him, ask someone else to prom. Immediate advice.
That is the classic parental trap. We jump to solutions because we feel uncomfortable with their distress. And we completely miss the fact that sometimes, maybe even often, the act of just putting the feelings into words provides all the relief they actually needed in that moment.
So you don't want solutions, they want validation to be heard.
Exactly. So the best first response, always, just listen. And maybe headline the core emotion you're hearing. I remember my own daughter venting once about how school had become all stressful lectures and AP cramming, no fun electives left. She went on for a bit.
And you resisted the urge to give advice.
I did. When she finally paused, I just said, wow, it sounds like school is now all vegetables and no dessert.
Huh. And how did she react?
She just sighed and said, exactly. It showed I'd actually listened. I got the emotional essence of her complaint. It reminds me of that plea from the high school girl in the readings. Please just tell parents that when I complain about my day, the only thing I want them to say back is, oh my God, that stinks.
Simple empathy. Non-judgmental validation. That's often enough.
Often it's everything.
Another really useful tool mentioned is emotional granularity, helping teens get more specific than just, I'm upset.
Yes. Teenagers often use these big, vague buckets. I'm anxious, I'm stressed, everything sucks, it's overwhelming. We can act like they're emotional editors, gently helping them find more precise words. Think of Mrs. Bennet in Pride and Prejudice, who fancied herself nervous when she was really just discontented or bored.
Right.
So if a teen says, oof, I'm so upset about this project, we can gently probe. Upset how? Are you feeling aggravated? Or maybe overwhelmed, swamped, disappointed, just discouraged? Helping them name the feeling more accurately does a few things. It makes them feel more understood, it gives them a little more sense of control over the feeling, and it helps pinpoint the actual problem more clearly so they can address it.
Okay, so listening, validating, helping them name the feeling that usually works, but not always. Sometimes the feelings are just too big, too overwhelming. When should parents make that tricky shift from just encouraging expression to actively encouraging emotional control?
The rule of thumb here is really about function. You shift gears when just talking about it isn't helping anymore. And the feelings have become so intense, they're actively interfering with their ability to function.
Like practical stuff.
Yeah. If your teen is so anxious, she's seriously talking about skipping an important job interview, or she's so furious after an argument, she literally cannot focus on studying for a major test. And venting isn't dialing it down. That's when it's time to help her find ways to get those feelings back into a manageable size, put them back in their box, so to speak, so she can move forward.
Okay. And one of the most practical control strategies, ironically, is one we often dismiss as just avoidance. Simple adaptive distraction.
Exactly. Distraction gets a bad rap sometimes, but it's actually a highly efficient tool when used strategically. Think about the kid who comes home, totally wiped, sees a mountain of homework, feels that wave of agitation or overwhelm rising,
Yeah.
and they deliberately turn to watch funny YouTube clips for 15 minutes or play one round of a quick game. They've intentionally swiveled the spotlight of their attention away from the stressor.
It's like hitting a reset button.
It is. The resentment, the agitation, it ebbs just enough. Then they can often return to the task with a slightly reset emotional baseline. The key is that these distractions are kept relatively short, they provide genuine relief, and they don't become a chronic way of avoiding responsibilities altogether. Then they're healthy.
We also need to remember the power of small pleasures for teens, right? Especially given all that heightened neurological wiring we talked about.
Absolutely. Because of that upgraded brain, teenagers feel everything more acutely. The bad stuff, yes, but also the good stuff. So small, intentional pleasures can pack a bigger punch for them than they might for adults.
Like what?
Simple things. A long hot shower, making a mug of really good hot chocolate, losing themselves in music they love. We should actively encourage that kind of self-soothing. And hey, don't knock emotional time travel either.
Emotional time travel.
Yeah, sometimes you'll see a pretty mature high schooler suddenly retreat to watching old episodes of Phineas and Ferb, or rereading their worn-out Captain Underpants books from elementary school.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It looks like regression, but it's often a smart coping mechanism. Returning to those simpler, comforting things from a less stressful time allows them to momentarily access that feeling of safety and regain their mental equilibrium before tackling the current stress.
Okay, now let's tackle the control tool that probably gets the biggest eye roll from teenagers. Deliberate breathing. Tell an upset teen, just take a deep breath, and you're likely to get hostility.
Oh, yeah. Major eye roll guaranteed. Because it sounds dismissive, and honestly, it doesn't make intuitive sense to them why it would work. So we had to sell the science behind it.
Okay, give us the pitch.
Explain that their nervous system has these two competing networks. First, there's the sympathetic nervous system. That's the ancient cave dweller part. Its job is fight or flight. It detects a threat. Could be a tiger, could be a pop quiz. It doesn't really distinguish, and it jacks up your heart rate, makes your breathing fast and shallow, gets you ready to run or fight.
Okay, the stress response.
Right. Then there's the parasympathetic network. That's the rest and digest system. Its job is to calm everything back down.
And breathing is the switch.
It's the biological hack to flip the switch. When we deliberately override that short, panicked breathing of fight or flight by taking slow, deep, controlled breaths, inhaling deeply, exhaling slowly, the nerves on the surface of our lungs detect that change.
And they send a message?
They send an immediate, all-clear signal straight to the brain. Because slow, deep breathing is how we breathe when we feel safe and relaxed. That signal essentially tells the brain, false alarm, no tiger here. It overrides the fight or flight command and actively activates the calming parasympathetic network. It's not magic. It's pure physiology. High-stress pros like Navy SEALs use this constantly because it works.
Okay, selling the science might actually get past the eye roll. Beyond the biological hacks, we can also help them change feelings by correcting their thinking, right? Especially when they get overwhelmed and perspective goes out the window.
Absolutely. Anxious or overwhelmed, teens typically make two big cognitive errors. They drastically overestimate how bad a situation is or will be, and they drastically underestimate their own ability to cope with it.
Catastrophizing, baby.
Exactly. So we can help them course correct. We can gently challenge those assumptions. Or we can teach techniques like cognitive reframing, looking at the situation from a different angle, or mindful observation. There's a great mindfulness metaphor I like for creating distance from overwhelming feelings. Imagine your mind is a pond. Your thoughts and feelings are the fish swimming around, sometimes frantically. Your goal is to be the pond.
Ah, the container, not the fish.
Right. The fish are doing their thing, but you, the pond, are large enough to hold them without being completely churned up by them. It fosters that dispassionate observer stance.
And the last tool here is leveraging self-distancing, tapping into Solomon's paradox.
Yeah, Solomon's paradox is the fascinating finding that people are generally much wiser and more rational when thinking about a friend's problem than they are when thinking about their own exact same problem. We have more distance, less emotional entanglement.
So how do we help teens use that?
When they're stuck in an emotional situation, encourage them to adopt a new vantage point. Ask them point blank, okay, what advice would you give your best friend if they were going through this exact same thing? Or even imagine your future self looking back. What advice would future you give current you?
Thinking about it as if it's happening to someone else.
Precisely. It allows them to access that wiser, calmer, cold cognition part of their brain, objectify the situation a bit, reduce the raw emotional heat, and usually find a much clearer path forward. #tag Coney conclusion.
Wow, okay, this has been a really rich deep dive. It feels like it completely shifts how we should be thinking about and approaching emotional adolescence. Let's try to synthesize the really critical takeaways for everyone listening.
Yeah, definitely. I think takeaway number one has to be, emotions are not the enemy. They are valuable data. They belong at the decision-making table, providing crucial information. They shouldn't be ignored, pushed aside, or automatically medicated into silence just because they're uncomfortable.
Right, data, not disruption. Okay, what's number 2?
Number two, emotional discomfort is not a sign of failure or weakness. It is absolutely essential for growth and maturation. That painful feeling after you mess up, the frustration when you don't reach a goal, that forces the reflection and adjustment that helps teenagers learn and grow up. Feeling the emotional impact of difficult experiences is actually what helps us figure out the kind of capable, resilient adult we want to become.
So, discomfort is necessary friction for growth. Got it. And third,
That intense volatility we see, especially in younger teens, the gawky brain effect, the tears, the anger, the seemingly disproportionate reactions, that is not psychological fragility. Teenagers are developmentally volatile, yes, but they are generally much sturdier than they seem in those moments. That intensity is a natural, expected part of their neurological and psychological stage.
Okay, so emotions are data, discomfort fuels growth, and intensity isn't fragility. And the ultimate goal here, the long-term benefit of helping teens embrace this full range of emotion, it's not just about raising capable adults, is it?
No, I think it goes deeper. It's about raising compassionate adults. Teenagers who learn to be alert to and reasonably comfortable with their own intense inner lives, who can recognize and manage their own anxiety, their own anger, their own sadness. Those are the individuals who become most interested in and concerned for the emotional experiences of other people. That empathy, that compassion, it grows out of mastering your own uncomfortable feelings. It becomes the foundation for caring about the world beyond yourself.
That's a really powerful point, and I think maybe the most powerful takeaway, the one that lands right back on us as parents and adults, is our responsibility to model this stuff. I'm thinking about that example you gave earlier, the parent feeling anxious about college applications.
Ah, yes. Her immediate impulse was just to fire off a text, right? To relieve her own anxiety by getting an answer immediately.
But she didn't. She paused.
She paused. She engaged her own prefrontal cortex. She waited until her daughter was home, had decompressed, had a snack, was emotionally available. Then she asked for permission. Hey, I had a thought about your applications. Is now an okay time to talk for a minute?
And that pause, that decision to manage her own emotions first, that communicates so much more than the actual question.
It communicates huge sensitivity, not just about the topic, but about how we handle our own emotional stress without just dumping it on to someone else. It models regulation.
Which is really the ultimate challenge, isn't it? Turning our own awareness, maybe of our own emotional patterns, our past mistakes, maybe patterns we learned from our own parents, turning that into a conscious choice to try and do better by our kids now.
That's exactly it.
So, the question we want to leave you, the listener, with is this. What's one emotional pattern you could model maybe a little more effectively this week? Could you take that pause, like that parent did? Wait until after dinner or after a snack before bringing up that stressful topic? Could you try that deliberate breathing technique yourself before you respond to that triggering email from work? If you apply that effective emotional management in your own life, honestly, your teenager will probably learn more from watching you do that than from any lecture you could ever give them. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.